Welcome to the channel. If epic sci-fi stories are your thing, you've just found your new home. Subscribe, like, and share the adventure. The first thing Commander Vel noticed about the human homeworld wasn't its blue oceans or swirling white clouds. It was the silence. No distress beacons. No military chatter crackling across comm channels. No desperate pleas for mercy echoing through space as the hegemony's warfleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of their solar system. Just nothing. Admiral, Vel's second-in-command whispered, his voice barely audible over the bridge's ambient hum. The humans aren't responding to our hail. Admiral Cax leaned forward in his command throne, all four of his eyes focusing on the tactical display. 300 ships, the largest invasion force the hegemony had ever assembled, hung in perfect formation above the third planet. Below them, a world of 8 billion souls continued its lazy rotation, apparently oblivious to their arrival. Perhaps their communications are primitive, suggested Navigation Officer Lin, her scales shimmering nervously. The preliminary surveys indicated they've only achieved basic spaceflight. Basic spaceflight doesn't explain this, Cax growled, gesturing toward the holographic display, where there should have been chaos-fleeing civilian vessels hastily assembled defense fleets, orbital stations desperately broadcasting surrender terms. There was only the gentle dance of weather patterns across continents. Vel had conquered 47 worlds in her career. She'd seen every possible response to overwhelming force: terror, defiance, bargaining, rage, but never indifference. Never this eerie calm that seemed to emanate from Earth like a held breath. "Sir," the communications officer called out, his voice cracking with confusion. "I'm detecting massive data flows across their networks, but none of it's directed at us. They're talking about something called morning coffee and traffic delays." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. 300 warships, each capable of cracking a moon in half, and the humans below were discussing beverage preferences. "Deploy the sensor drones," Cax ordered. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know what we're dealing with." The first wave of reconnaissance drones descended toward Earth's atmosphere, their advanced sensors probing, scanning, cataloging. Within minutes, data began streaming back to the fleet. Population centers, industrial facilities, transportation networks, all exactly as expected from the preliminary reports. A typical pre-spaceflight civilization, barely worthy of conquest protocols. But then the anomaly started. "Admiral," Vel's voice was tight with confusion as she studied her readouts. "The atmospheric composition readings are strange. There are trace elements that shouldn't exist naturally. And the electromagnetic spectrum, there are patterns I've never seen before." "Explain." "It's as if their entire atmosphere has been modified, engineered. But that's impossible for a species that's only just reached their own moon." The tactical officer suddenly straightened, his tentacles quivering with alarm. "Sir, energy spike detected on the planet's surface. Massive power buildup in multiple locations." Every eye on the bridge turned to the main display as warning lights began flashing across their instruments. For the first time since arriving, something was happening on the planet below, but it wasn't what any of them expected. Instead of weapons powering up or shields activating, something far more unsettling occurred. Across Earth's surface, in perfect synchronization, thousands of structures that had appeared to be simple communication towers began to emit a low, harmonic frequency. The sound carried through space itself, resonating through their ships' hulls with impossible precision. It wasn't a war cry. It wasn't a surrender. It was something far more chilling: a greeting. Calm, measured, and utterly confident. The sound of a species that had been expecting them. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that Stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Admiral, Vel whispered, her voice barely audible over the haunting harmonic that now filled their bridge. I don't think we're the first to arrive here. The harmonic frequency cut off as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the hegemony fleet suspended in a silence that now felt ominous rather than peaceful. Admiral Cax found himself gripping the arms of his command throne, his claws leaving deep gouges in the metal. Report, he barked, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. The energy signatures have disappeared, sir, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. It's as if they never existed. But our instruments recorded massive power outputs, equivalent to our capital ship reactors from over 2,000 locations simultaneously. Commander Vel was studying her personal scanner, her expression growing more troubled by the second. Admiral, I'm detecting gravitational anomalies throughout this system, subtle ones, but they're there. As if massive objects are present, but somehow cloaked. That's impossible, Navigation Officer Lin protested. No known technology can hide gravitational signatures. The laws of physics. Her words were cut off as every screen on the bridge flickered once, then displayed this same image, a simple blue marble spinning slowly against the backdrop of space. But this wasn't a view from their external cameras. This was Earth as seen from a perspective none of their ships occupied. Then a voice spoke, not through their communication system, but somehow directly into the air around them. The words were in perfect hegemony standard, spoken with the casual tone of someone commenting on the weather. Welcome to the Sol System, Admiral Cax of the Hegemony Third Fleet. Your arrival time was precisely 14 minutes and 37 seconds ahead of our projections. Impressive. The bridge erupted into chaos. Officers shouted orders, ran diagnostic checks, searched for the source of the transmission. But Cax sat perfectly still, a cold dread settling in his chest. They knew his name. They knew his fleet designation. And they had been expecting him. I am Captain Nash of the Terran Defense Coalition, the voice continued, still maddeningly calm. Before we proceed, I feel obligated to point out that your current formation leaves your supply vessels exposed to flanking maneuvers from the asteroid belt. You might want to adjust your positioning. Vel's scanner beeped insistently. She looked down, then up at Cax with wide eyes. Sir, there are ships moving in the asteroid belt. Dozens of them. There. They're already in position to attack our rear guard. How is that possible? Cax roared. Our scouts surveyed this system for months. Your scouts were quite thorough. Captain Nash's voice replied, somehow managing to sound both complimentary and mildly condescending. They found exactly what we wanted them to find. Humans have always been exceptional at appearing smaller than we actually are. The main display shifted, showing a tactical overview of the system. Red dots appeared throughout the asteroid belt, around the outer planets, even embedded within the rings of the gas giant. Hundreds of them, then thousands. The hegemony fleet of 300 suddenly looked very small indeed. This is impossible, Lin whispered. The preliminary surveys showed they barely had chemical rockets. They've only been to their own moon. Oh, we've been much further than that, Nash replied. And now there was something almost amused in his tone. We've been watching the hegemony expand across this galaxy for quite some time, learning, preparing. You see, Admiral, humans have a particular talent for patience. Cax found his voice at last. What do you want? What do we want? There was a pause, and when Nash spoke again, his tone had shifted from casual to something far more serious. We want you to understand something, Admiral. Earth's silence during your approach wasn't because we were unaware of your presence. It wasn't because we were unprepared for war. It was because we've moved beyond the need for such primitive solutions. The display changed again, showing detailed schematics of every ship in the hegemony fleet. Not just their positions, but their internal layouts, their weapon systems, their crew complements. Information that should have been impossible to obtain. Every world you've conquered, every species you've subjugated, every victory you've claimed, we've been watching, learning, adapting, and we've discovered something interesting about the hegemony's expansion pattern. Red lines began connecting star systems on the galactic map, showing the hegemony's growth over centuries. But overlaid in blue were other lines, human exploration routes that preceded hegemony arrival by decades, sometimes centuries. You've never been conquerors, Nash said quietly. You've been following a path we laid out for you. Every primitive world you've encountered, every easy victory, it was all designed to bring you here. To this moment. Commander Vel's hands were shaking as she realized the implication. They've been shepherding our expansion, guiding us toward Earth. The question now, Captain Nash continued, is whether you're ready to learn why. Admiral Cax stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. The red dots representing hidden human vessels continued to multiply across the system, turning what had seemed like an easy conquest into something resembling a carefully constructed trap. But that wasn't what chilled him to his core. It was the realization that every hegemony victory of the past 3 centuries might have been orchestrated by the very species they'd come here to conquer. You're claiming you manipulated our entire expansion? Cax finally managed, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Manipulated is such an ugly word, Captain Nash replied, his tone remaining infuriatingly conversational. We prefer guided. You see, Admiral, humans discovered something troubling when we first ventured beyond our solar system. The galaxy was full of aggressive species, all following the same pattern: expand, conquer, consume, repeat. Left unchecked, the cycle would have eventually consumed every habitable world. The main display shifted to show a simulation of galactic development spanning millennia. Dozens of aggressive civilizations expanded outward like cancerous growths, eventually colliding and destroying each other in massive wars that left entire sectors barren. We realized we had 2 choices, Nash continued. We could join this destructive cycle, become conquerors ourselves, and hope we'd be the last species standing. Or we could find a better way. Commander Vel found herself leaning forward despite her fear. What kind of better way? We chose precision over power, Admiral. Instead of conquering worlds, we began studying the species that would eventually try to conquer us. We learned their languages, their cultures, their military doctrines. And then we began to guide their expansion in ways that would minimize overall galactic devastation. The tactical display now showed the true scope of human intervention. Blue markers appeared on hundreds of worlds throughout hegemony space worlds where humans had arrived first, studied the local populations, and then carefully staged scenarios that would make hegemony conquest both inevitable and ultimately beneficial to the conquered species. Every world you've taken was already facing internal conflicts that would have destroyed them within generations, Nash explained. Ecological collapse, resource wars, social upheaval. The hegemony didn't conquer thriving civilizations, you rescued dying ones. We simply made sure you found them at precisely the right moment. Navigation Officer Lin's voice was barely a whisper. The agricultural techniques we shared with the Vorth homeworld, those weren't hegemony innovations. Human developments, yes. As were the medical advances that saved the Kelton colonies from the plague, and the fusion technology that prevented the Zull homeworld from becoming uninhabitable. We've been solving problems through hegemony expansion for centuries. Admiral, Cax felt something fundamental shifting in his understanding of the universe. Why? Why help us conquer in your name? Because conquest was inevitable, Nash replied, and for the first time, there was a note of sadness in his voice. The galaxy is full of species like the hegemony aggressive, expansionist, convinced that might makes right. We couldn't stop that pattern, but we could control it. Guide it toward outcomes that preserved life rather than destroyed it. The display showed comparative statistics, casualty rates for hegemony conquests versus historical averages for similar expansions by other species. The numbers were staggering. Hegemony conquests resulted in 90% fewer casualties than the galactic norm. Every species the hegemony has conquered is still alive, still maintaining their cultures within your empire. That's not normal, Admiral. Most conquerors commit genocide. The hegemony integrates. And that integration pattern? Those administrative policies that seem so naturally compassionate, we wrote them. Commander Vel was studying her scanner readings, her expression shifting from fear to something approaching awe. The gravitational anomalies we detected, they're not cloaked ships, they're space stations, massive ones. Some of them are larger than our homeworld. Correct. We've been building infrastructure throughout this galaxy for over 800 years. Not weapons platforms, research stations, manufacturing facilities, ecological restoration centers. While other species fought over resources, we learned to create them. The main display now showed the true scope of human civilization. Not the quota, single blue world they'd come to conquer, but a vast network of installations spanning dozens of star systems, all carefully hidden until this moment. The silence you encountered when you arrived wasn't indifference, Nash continued. It wasn't even confidence, it was grief. Because your arrival here means we failed. Failed at what? Cax asked. Failed to guide the hegemony toward a better path. You see, Admiral, this System Sol was meant to be your final conquest. The moment when you encountered a species so obviously advanced that you'd be forced to reconsider everything you believed about strength and survival. The tactical display zoomed in on Earth, revealing the true nature of those communication towers that had emitted the harmonic greeting. They weren't weapons or shields, they were terraforming stations, actively maintaining Earth's atmosphere and climate at optimal levels for not just humans, but for dozens of species the hegemony had conquered. We prepared this world to be a new kind of capital for your empire. A place where all the species you've integrated could thrive together. Where the hegemony could evolve from conquerors into something greater gardeners of galactic civilization. Admiral Cax felt the weight of centuries crushing down on him. And if we refuse? For the first time, Captain Nash's voice carried a note of steel. Then we'll have to implement our contingency plan. The one we really hoped we'd never need. The silence that followed Captain Nash's words seemed to stretch across the entire star system. Admiral Cax found himself staring at the tactical display, watching thousands of blue dots representing human installations throughout the galaxy. Each one represented centuries of patient preparation for this moment, a moment that could apparently go very wrong. Your contingency plan, Cax said carefully. What does that entail? Something we call the silent protocol, Nash replied, and his tone had shifted from conversational to something approaching regret. You see, Admiral, we've spent 8 centuries learning everything there is to know about aggressive expansion. We understand the psychology, the economics, the military doctrine. And we've discovered that species like the hegemony can't be stopped, they can only be redirected. The main display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hegemony space appeared in red, but now it was surrounded by concentric rings of blue human influence, extending far beyond anything they'd imagined. If we can't guide you toward becoming gardeners, Nash continued, then we'll have to ensure you become excellent prisoners instead. Commander Vel's scanner began beeping frantically. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Not weapons, something else. Something I don't recognize. Stasis fields, Nash explained matter-of-factly. Every hegemony, world, every ship, every installation, they're all currently surrounded by what we call temporal bubbles. Think of them as pause buttons for an entire civilization. The implications hit Admiral Cax like a physical blow. You're threatening to freeze our entire empire. Not threatening, Admiral. Explaining. The fields are already in place. They have been for decades. Right now I could end hegemony expansion with a single command, preserving your species indefinitely while the rest of the galaxy develops beyond the need for conquest. Navigation Officer Lin was frantically checking her readings. The gravitational anomalies, they're not just space stations. They're generators, massive ones, and they're already active, low-power mode, Nash confirmed. The stasis fields are currently operating at 1% capacity, which is why you can still think and move normally. But every hegemony citizen is currently experiencing time at a rate approximately 1 second slower than standard galactic time. Hardly noticeable, but it demonstrates our capability. The tactical display zoomed in on several hegemony worlds, showing subtle distortions in spacetime around each planet. The technology required for such a feat was beyond anything in there. Databases representing a level of advancement that made their invasion fleet look like toys. This is insane, Cax breathed. You're holding an entire civilization hostage. We're offering an entire civilization a choice, Nash corrected. The same choice we've been hoping you'd make for centuries. Evolution or preservation. Growth or stasis. Become gardeners of the galaxy, or become museum pieces in a universe that's moved beyond you. Commander Vel looked up from her scanner, her expression troubled. Admiral, there's something else. The energy signatures I'm detecting, they're not just around hegemony space. They're everywhere, every inhabited system in the galaxy. Correct, Nash said, and now his voice carried a note of infinite sadness. We've spent 8 centuries preparing for this conversation, not just with the hegemony, but with dozens of aggressive species across the galaxy. Today, we're having similar discussions with 17 different civilizations simultaneously. The scale of it was staggering. Humans hadn't just been watching and guiding the hegemony's expansion. They'd been managing the development of the entire galaxy, preparing for the day when they'd have to choose between allowing continued chaos or imposing order. How many species have chosen evolution? Cax asked quietly. 3 so far, Nash replied. The Alterans realized that their expansion was destroying their own culture and chose to become interstellar mediators instead. The Velkan discovered that sharing their technological gifts was more fulfilling than conquest. The Threni, well, they chose to explore other galaxies entirely, seeking new challenges beyond warfare. And the others? The others chose preservation. They're currently existing in accelerated stasis fields, experiencing rich, fulfilling lives within carefully maintained simulations of their golden ages. They're happy, Admiral, genuinely happy. They're just contained. Admiral Cax felt the weight of his entire civilization resting on his shoulders. You're asking me to choose the fate of trillions of beings. I'm asking you to choose whether those trillions of beings continue to exist as they are, or evolve into something better. The hegemony has all the tools necessary to become the greatest gardening civilization in galactic history. Your integration protocols, your administrative systems, your respect for conquered cultures, with some modifications, you could transform from conquerors into cultivators. The main display shifted again, showing a projection of what the galaxy could become. Instead of the chaotic expansion patterns they'd seen before, it showed a carefully tended garden of civilizations, each developing according to their strengths while being protected from their weaknesses. What would you need from us? Commander Vel asked, surprising herself with the question. Complete restructuring of your military into an ecological restoration force, Nash replied immediately. Conversion of your conquest protocols into species, development programs, and acceptance of human guidance during the transition period. For how long? Until you no longer need it. Some species adapt quickly. The Alterans were ready for independence within 50 years. Others take longer. But the goal is always the same, to help each civilization reach its full potential without destroying itself or others. Admiral Cax closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 8 centuries of human patience pressing down on him. When he opened them again, he looked directly at the communication display. And if we choose preservation, what happens to us? You continue to exist, Admiral. Your empire continues to function. Your people live full, meaningful lives. You just stop expanding. Stop conquering. The universe moves forward without you. But you remain exactly as you are, forever. The choice, Cax realized, wasn't really between evolution and death. It was between growth and stagnation. Between becoming something greater or remaining exactly what they'd always been. The question was, which terrified him more? Admiral Cax stood before the great viewport of his flagship, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. The blue marble looked so peaceful, so deceptively simple, yet he now knew it was the center of a galactic network that had been shaping civilization for 8 centuries. Behind him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence for his decision, a choice that would determine the fate of their entire species. "Captain Nash," he said finally, his voice carrying across the bridge, "I need to understand something." "Why us? Why the hegemony?" "With all your power, your technology, your ability to manipulate galactic development, why did you choose to guide us instead of simply stopping us?" There was a pause before Nash replied, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight of centuries. "Because we recognize something in you, Admiral. Something we saw in ourselves once, long ago. The hegemony doesn't conquer out of cruelty or greed. You conquer because you genuinely believe you're bringing order to chaos, stability to unstable worlds. Your integration protocols prove that you preserve the cultures you conquer. You improve their living conditions. You offer them paths to citizenship within your empire." Commander Vel looked up from her station. "But we still conquer them against their will." "Yes," Nash acknowledged. "But unlike most aggressive species, you feel guilt about that necessity. Your military codes include provisions for minimizing civilian casualties. Your administrators are trained in cultural sensitivity. Your generals study the histories of conquered worlds to understand what they're taking. The hegemony conquers. But it doesn't destroy. That's rare, Admiral. Rarer than you know." The main display shifted, showing historical data on galactic conquest patterns. The statistics were sobering. Most aggressive species had casualty rates 10 to 20 times higher than the hegemonies, and cultural preservation rates that were effectively zero. "We saw in you the potential to become something we'd never seen before," Nash continued. "A species that could impose order without imposing cruelty. Gardeners of civilization who could help other species reach their potential without destroying." "What made them unique?" Admiral Cax turned from the viewport to face his crew. Each of them represented decades of military service, countless conquered worlds, lives spent in service to an empire they'd never questioned. Now they all faced the same impossible choice he did. "What happens to our people if we choose evolution?" he asked. "The soldiers, the administrators, the citizens who've built their entire identities around hegemony expansion. They become something greater," Nash replied. "Your soldiers become ecological restoration specialists, helping damaged worlds recover from centuries of exploitation. Your administrators become cultural preservation experts, ensuring that every species maintains its unique identity while contributing to galactic civilization. Your citizens become explorers and teachers, sharing knowledge instead of imposing rule." Navigation Officer Lin spoke up hesitantly. "And if some of our people can't adapt to that change, then they're welcome to join the preservation colonies," Nash said gently. "No one will be forced to change against their will. Those who choose evolution will lead the hegemony forward. Those who prefer the old ways will live fulfilling lives in carefully maintained simulations where conquest and expansion continue forever." The bridge fell silent as the crew contemplated this. It wasn't just a choice between two futures, it was a choice between reality and comfortable illusion, between growth and stagnation, between facing the unknown and clinging to the familiar. "Admiral," Commander Vell said quietly, "may I ask what you're thinking?" Cax was quiet for a long moment, staring at the data stream showing human influence throughout the galaxy. 8 centuries of patient work, of careful guidance, of preparing for this exact moment. And through it all, humans had maintained their hope that the hegemony could become something better. "I'm thinking," he said finally, "about the first world I helped conquer, the Keltons. Their homeworld was dying from industrial pollution, their people were starving, their governments were collapsing into civil war. When we arrived, they fought us desperately, believing we'd come to destroy them." He paused, remembering. "But after the conquest, when we began implementing restoration protocols, when we started sharing resources and technology, I saw a Kelton child laugh for the first time in generations. Really laugh with joy instead of hysteria. And I realized that despite everything, despite the fear and the resistance and the pain of conquest, we'd given them something precious, hope for a future." The crew watched him, understanding beginning to dawn in their expressions. "That's what Captain Nash is offering us," Cax continued. "Not just survival, but the chance to give that gift of hope to the entire galaxy, without the conquest, without the fear, without the pain." He turned to the communication display. "Captain Nash, I have one final question. If we choose evolution, if we accept your guidance and transform the hegemony into something new, what happens when we no longer need your help? What happens when we've grown beyond the need for gardeners?" "Then you become gardeners yourselves," Nash replied simply. "You take responsibility for guiding the next generation of species toward their potential. The cycle continues, but with wisdom instead of force, with patience instead of conquest." Admiral Cax closed his eyes, feeling the weight of decision settle on his shoulders. When he opened them, his voice was steady and sure. "The hegemony chooses evolution." Across the bridge, his crew straightened with something that looked remarkably like relief. They'd spent their careers conquering worlds, now they'd have the chance to restore them. "Welcome to the next phase of galactic civilization, Admiral," Captain Nash said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice now. "We have 800 years of patience to share with you. Let's get started." As the first human ships began emerging from their hiding places throughout the system, revealing themselves as partners rather than conquerors, Admiral Cax realized that Earth's silence hadn't been empty after all. It had been full of possibility, waiting for the moment when the galaxy was ready to hear it, the moment when precision finally triumphed over power, and the stars themselves learned to grow.